We're going to talk to Clare Muldoon and Anne McLaughlin now, because what would an independent Scotland actually look like? Humza Yousaf, who became the First Minister of Scotland after Nicola Sturgeon stood down after the trans row and all sorts of other problems with her, there are, of course, problems in regard to criminal investigation into Nicola Sturgeon and indeed her husband and indeed the Treasurer of the SNP. But anyway, she stood down, Humza Yousaf took over, and now he's trying to kind of shift the debate and talk about an independent Scotland again. So if Humza Yousaf got what he wanted, Scots would still be free to live or work in England with no border controls after independence. This is the blueprint that he has put out. He said it would be a decision for the UK government, but in his mind, it would be, this report on citizenship said, a separate Scotland would be part of the long-standing common travel area. He said there was no contradiction between the SNP's plans to encourage a mass influx of foreign immigrants, signing up to free movement as part of the EU membership, and having an open border with England. So if you want to move to England, if we're taking back control of our borders, why not just move to Scotland, get Scottish citizenship, which you then get British citizenship, but Scotland's addition to the CTA, the common travel area, would have to be negotiated with the UK government. Let's talk to Clare Muldoon and Anne McLaughlin about this. Clare Muldoon is a broadcaster, Anne McLaughlin is an SNP MP for Glasgow North East. First of all, maybe we'll talk to Anne, actually, and say, Anne, maybe you could just explain a little bit more about this and how it would work from the SNP's perspective.
What this paper is about, this is a proposal from the Scottish Government, and it's part of a series of proposals that's about ensuring that the people of Scotland understand what we mean by independence. And what this is about is ensuring that we can attract enough people to grow our economy in a way that we can't at the moment because of the restrictions placed on us by being part of the UK. It's also about being a little bit more welcoming and less hostile to migrants, and saying that people are welcome. And it's also saying that people living in England are also welcome. I heard you saying something about Scots can all come to live in England, but if you live in England now, you will be able to come and live in Scotland. So it's about being welcoming and positive, but it's also about recognising that we need more people if we're going to run all the different industries that we're trying to keep going, and if we're going to grow our economy.
And I assume you, like your party, was against Brexit. You want to be part of the EU again in an independent Scotland. I would imagine that's your opinion. Am I right in that?
Yep, and that's in the paper as well.
Sure,
that I thought we very much intend to be part of Europe again.
Yeah, I thought it would be. So my point is, if people move to an independent Scotland, and then you're saying that they would then have Scottish citizenship, they would then perhaps have British citizenship as well under your model, if I'm characterising it correctly, and tell me if I'm not. So essentially, if you're from, for example, France, Germany, Albania, or other parts of the world, and you want to move to Scotland, isn't that just a backdoor into England, Wales and Northern Ireland if they're part of the common travel area?
I don't really understand your question. I mean, what we're saying is, are you questioning our wishing to be part of the EU?
No, listen.
Will that create a backdoor?
No, listen, if Scotland is an independent country and wants to be part of the EU, that is its right. But my question is on the citizenship point, if you're saying that people moving to Scotland can then move to England or Wales, well, how is that fair on England, Wales or Northern Ireland in terms of the immigrants that they perhaps don't want coming in?
But I don't think that is what we're saying, and we're not saying that anybody who moves to Scotland or works in Scotland can become a Scottish citizen. That's not what the paper proposes at all. So, I mean, and also, you know, England will have its own migration rules. I would rather they were different to the ones that we currently have under Britain, but England will have to make its own mind up. But we're not suggesting that anybody can. There are pretty clear rules there, or suggestions as they are at the moment, because we're not yet independent, pretty clear suggestions about who will be able to become a Scottish citizen. And what you're saying about people just moving from France to Scotland, becoming a citizen, then moving to England, that's not part of those suggestions.
But surely your suggestion, sorry if I'm misunderstanding this, but surely your suggestion is that Scottish citizens could, if they wanted to, move to England, Wales or Northern Ireland. That's what you're proposing, is it not?
Yeah, we're proposing to remain part of the common travel area.
Okay, so if you have immigrants who come to Scotland who then become Scottish citizens and go through that process, well then they could of course, emigrate to England, Scotland, or Wales. But how is England, Wales, or Northern Ireland? But how is that fair on what the rest of the UK would be?
Oh my! I mean, honestly, it's not that simple a process. If somebody, right, let's take somebody in France wants to go and live in England for some reason, they're not going to move to Scotland, stay long enough to become a Scottish citizen, and then nip over the border to England. That's just, I mean, it's just fanciful to think that people will go through that incredibly long process just to get to England. So it's kind of reminding me of the time that Romania became part of the EU, and we journalists queued up at the airports waiting for the plane loads of people to come and desperate to be living in England, and it never happened. I don't think you're going to have that big a problem.
Okay, but if they're part of the common travel area, and if you have, let's not talk about immigrants at the moment, let's talk about people who perhaps were born in Scotland. If you're saying as part of the common travel area, they could live and work in any part of the British Isles. You're talking about Ireland as well, which of course has been part of the common travel area since the 1920s. So presumably, a number of people, I'll talk to Clare Muldoon in 1 second, but I just want to get an answer from you first. A lot of people will say, well, what's the point really of Scottish independence if you can have all the rights of being in the UK? Surely if you're independent, you've got to give up some rights.
Well, it's not so much, it's not about giving up rights, it's about gaining more rights. So independence is about being able to decide things like this paper, you know, well, there's be another paper on migration coming forward. Who can come and live in Scotland? Who can come and work in Scotland? And at the moment, we can't decide that. So at the moment, our NHS is suffering, our hospitality industry is suffering, our tourism industry is suffering, our agriculture industry is suffering because we can't make those decisions. So independence is about being able to make decisions like those and others that we currently can't do in order to benefit our NHS, in order to benefit our industries. So, I mean, I could sit here all day giving you lots and lots of reasons for independence, and I'm very happy to do so.
Okay, Clare Muldoon is a broadcaster. I mean, to me, this seems, I could be wrong, but it seems to me as if the SNP want to have their cake and eat it with this. What do you think, Clare?
Well, of course it is, and that's what the SNP have done all along. That's the rhetoric. Anne used the word there, fanciful. Well, is it not fanciful to even think of independence in the first instance? It was in 2014, it was once in a generation vote. The polls I've just checked from June still don't show an overall massive majority for independence from the Scots living there at the moment. And indeed, Anne voluble denies the responsibility that the SNP have had whilst using the devolved route that Westminster have given the SNP for years. Worst drug deaths in Dundee, worst drug deaths in Europe, NHS times, waiting times, education falling off a cliff, the hospitality industry is closing post-pandemic because they don't have the materials to actually grow the economy. And here they are wanting everyone to come. They've got their ambassador, James McLeary, whose tweets, I think, are actually protected. But, you know, he is one of the most, you know, odious, voluble deniers of the British Empire, of the British Isles. He is stating that English people are this, British people are that. The SNP just do not get the point that most Scots don't want an independent Scotland. British people don't want Scotland to be independent. Devolution hasn't worked under the SNP. And Humza Yousaf, instead of trying to carol and get his cabinet and everything together to actually push through for the positive things that Scotland can give their own people that are living there at the moment, it's just an absolute waste of time and money. I don't get where they're coming from.
Let me get on to respond to that. I mean, there's some pretty serious allegations there, Anne, that Clare has made there in terms of devolution not working. There are problems with how the SNP has run Scotland, are there not?
If you're asking me, is the SNP perfect?
No.
The answer is no. Do we pretend to be perfect? The answer is no. But has the SNP made a difference? Well, it's made a difference to the families with children who now get the Scottish child payment. I don't know why Clare's laughing at that. She's maybe never been in a position where she's required extra support financially, but there are thousands of families in Scotland who are benefiting
funded by
from
the
that.
Barnett
I didn't interrupt you, Clare. Claire, I allowed you to continue with that very
Anne, make your point.
Please.
Claire, we'll come back to you. Anne, just make your point, please.
So the point is, I'm just going to say one thing. Claire said it was fanciful to want independence. Is she going to tell that to every other country in the world, the vast majority of whom are independent? Is it just her own country that's just fanciful if they think that they can make their own decisions? She really ought to be ashamed of that attitude.
Okay, Claire, are you ashamed of your attitude?
Absolutely not at all. The rest of my family still, I live in Glasgow actually, and not one of them, and I know a lot of people that live in Scotland at the moment do not support the SNP. Why then, ask yourself, Anne, why Stuart Hosey, Mary Black are going to resign for the next election? They know the appetite for independence is not there. And it's, you used the word fanciful.
Hold on. Let Claire speak. I'll come back to you, Anne, I promise.
I merely reiterated the word that you used, which was fanciful, Anne. That's why I used that word. Now, you can tell me that the SNP, and clearly you're sitting there as an SNP MP for Glasgow North, I think it is, or East or wherever. But the reality is the extra money that you've had, all the money that you've had from Westminster actually pays for Nicola Sturgeon's motorhome, Nicola Sturgeon and Peter Morell's, Angus Air Miles Robertson's flights all across the country. And he was in Dublin last week to talk about the Irish Scotland fusion, basically, of governments and politics.
Claire, let Anne come in again here. Anne, a final word from you.
I'm really not sure where to go with that. I mean, there's not much I can say to Claire. All I'm going to say is I don't think your listeners want to hear this tit for tat that she's trying to indulge me in. All I'm going to say is that this paper is an excellent paper. I would encourage people to read it. It's about saying to people, you are welcome under certain circumstances, and saying to migrants, we actually need you. Unless the people of Scotland are going to start breeding like rabbits, we need you to support our NHS, our other public services, and thank you for everything that you have been doing.
Hold on a second. So, Anne, just one final point for you. I mean, the UK government would have to agree to this. This is essentially a negotiation paper, a position paper, is it not? Do you think it's likely that the UK government is going to agree to all this? Certainly after the very, very tense and very long negotiations to get out of the EU. Some of it is perhaps pie in the sky, is it not?
Maybe they'll have learned their lesson from the long negotiations over Brexit. But remember, this is a paper for after independence. Once Scotland's independent, they're going to have to be a bit more grown up than they've been, and they're going to have to come to the negotiating table. And yeah, I'm pretty positive that those negotiations will go well.
Thank you both very much indeed. Clare Muldoon is a broadcaster, Anne McLaughlin is an MP.